I'm here on 14th Street in New York City where hundreds of people are messaging friends and family with their phones. But while they're texting, the FBI, advocacy groups, and government agencies are all battling over who can read those text messages. Most messages, like those sent from WhatsApp, which was the most popular messaging app in 2019, or Apple's iMessage, are encrypted. That means that they are kept private from everyone except the intended recipient. And while these platforms aren't perfect, Jeff Bezos' phone was recently accessed through a malicious video message via WhatsApp. Many people rely on the privacy that encryption provides daily.
Encryption is basically how you lock your door online.
Some law enforcement agencies and dignitaries like Attorney General William Barr would argue that the protection provided by encryption also protects criminals and terrorists.
There are situations where we would want the government, for example, to be able to get access to certain information.
The president believes tech companies like Apple should be building encryption with so-called backdoors.
I don't care. We have to find out what's going on.
The benefits of encryption as a tool are practically countless, and few would argue that on either side. The issue is who should be able to use that encryption and for what.
On the one hand, you have law enforcement and government agencies who are arguing that they need access to information in order to be able to prosecute criminals, versus those that are arguing that we need encryption to protect the functioning of our democracy.
And many human rights activists, privacy experts, and members of the tech community believe it is essential to online and physical safety.
If we don't have encryption, if we don't have that level of anonymity, then we simply can't exist online. And sometimes that might mean not exist in life.
End-to-end encryption saves lives. It saves lives.
You might be surprised how many services use encryption to keep data private. Banks use encryption for mobile payments and deposits. iMessage and Signal use end-to-end encryption to secure message data, and encryption is also used to protect sensitive data like health data.
Your web browser has strong encryption in it. Like whenever you buy something online, there's really strong encryption happening in the background of it to protect your credit card and your transaction.
To put it very simply, when information is sent from user A to user B, the information is converted into a jumble of nonsense. That nonsense is encrypted and decrypted according to a key. User B uses that key to decrypt the information, and this is all done digitally.
Encryption is the science of secret codes, but it is essentially just math. It's applied math. It's not fancy in terms of technological things. It's fancy math.
It's important to stress that encryption is a tool. It scrambles data to an unrecognizable state, even for the government. The argument for most is what data should be scrambled. Bank data, government communications, these things are often regarded as data that should be scrambled and therefore secured.
Do we really need there to be lawful access into the command and control channels that are used for operational technology, say to run a dam or an electric power plant? There's no reason you would ever need, quote unquote, lawful access to that system.
Personal communications like messages sent with WhatsApp are some of that scrambled data that's facing scrutiny.
On the other hand, there are other channels that you can imagine where there might be a more valid trade-off between what the protection that encryption provides and the needs of law enforcement to do investigations.
But who is to say who can scramble what data?
I don't think it's appropriate for the government to decide that they get security and we don't. And curious, if law enforcement actually went around your neighborhood and said, look, there's burglars on the loose, so we want you to leave your front door open. So in case you're a burglar, we can come find you without having to break down your door. Most people would say, that's crazy. Go back and learn your job. You're supposed to be protecting me.
And the line between digital and physical safety can be a thin one. For example, the EFF has worked with victims of domestic violence to help them stay safe and secure.
Being able to have communications over WhatsApp, whether you're trying to find your way to a shelter, find a shelter, arrange for whatever's going to happen when somebody's going to come get you or you're going to get yourself out, making sure that you can cover your tracks about who helped you, where you went, and where you got help can be the difference between life or death for people who are escaping domestic violence situations.
Encryption is also protecting human rights activists and folks who are living in countries with dictators and persecutory policies. Esra built a social platform called Ahwa where individuals who identify as LGBTQ+ can virtually meet and talk with each other in Middle Eastern and North African countries, such as Egypt, where homosexuality is not expressly illegal, but where the government has used laws against what they call debauchery, among others, to criminalize LGBTQ+ individuals.
Encryption is very important for us. I mean, we are operating in such a sensitive part of the world where censorship and surveillance are the norm, where individuals are tracked not just because of what they believe, but simply because of who they are. Their very identity, their very existence is in fact a crime.
Because Ahwa is public, yet anonymized and encrypted, people are able to share experiences, share resources, and share life-saving advice.
If somebody, for example, says, I'm a lesbian in Saudi Arabia, I have suicidal thoughts because I can't reconcile my identity with my faith, and then people can come who can relate to that topic without needing to sign in and see what other people are writing in terms of support, in terms of resources, where can I go to get any types of counseling, mental health. If you're a trans individual, where can I go to get some hormonal therapy without risking my life? This is what Ahwa really stands for, is accessibility with the responsibility for security.
On the other side of the issue, some argue that encryption actually masks threats to national security and the security of civilians.
Not all access all of the time is bad, and maybe we want to take some of the risks that are associated with having lawful access, understanding that they pose risks, and we still want to do that anyway.
On December 2nd, 2015, Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik opened fire in the city of San Bernardino, California, leaving 14 people and the 2 shooters dead. During the investigation, the FBI attained Farouk's iPhone, but could not access it through the passcode. They went to Apple to unlock it, and Apple couldn't help.
I think it's frankly disgraceful. I think it's a disgrace what they're doing. And I think that ultimately Apple will have the blood of dead Americans on their hands for these kinds of decisions.
Apple's encryption was so good, according to Apple, that Apple itself couldn't access the encrypted data on the phone. Beyond that, the assistance ordered by a federal judge would overhaul the system that disables the phone after 10 unsuccessful password attempts. Tim Cook called the order chilling.
We did not expect to be in this position at odds with our own government. But we believe strongly that we have a responsibility to help you protect your data and protect your privacy.
We have a tremendous problem with data breaches and lack of security in the digital world, and encryption is one of the very few tools we have that can help protect us, and so it's tremendously important that we stand up for it.
Putting what was being called a backdoor in the iOS framework would allow the FBI to access the contents of iPhones everywhere, as is legally its right with a warrant, but would also leave the operating system much more vulnerable to hackers and other governments.
It does come across often as the government side sort of more or less demanding a unicorn, right? We just want the tech sector to provide access to their products, but only for us, and only under the conditions that we say. And of course, the tech sector says, well, that's not possible, because math.
The FBI took Apple to court about the issue, but found another way into the iPhone without Apple's help.
Yet we're being asked to create a method to hack our own phones.
The case was dropped, but the debate still continues.
Encryption is good. The right way is to leave Apple alone. The government's being lazy. Investigation is too hard. That's what I say. So we're just going to sacrifice your civil liberty.
The price we pay for this privacy is that privacy covers criminals and the crimes they commit. Drugs and gun sales, human trafficking, these are all done in the very dark, secret, and private corners of the internet.
Where are we willing to risk not getting information for investigations? Where are we willing to risk potentially having the bad guys gain access to a channel because of, weakened encryption?
all of our rights have trade-offs. And we as a society have to decide if we want to make that trade-off. But I think we should recognize the downsides to the rest of us of taking away our security, and balance that against making it maybe slightly harder in maybe a few cases for the FBI to catch somebody who's done something wrong.
Facebook is now in the political spotlight, having declared its dedication to end-to-end encryption for messaging apps WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. In an open letter to Facebook, U.S. Attorney General William Barr, along with dignitaries from the UK and Australia, warned that, quote, security enhancements to the virtual world should not make us more vulnerable in the physical world, and that, quote, children's safety and law enforcement's ability to bring criminals to justice must not be the ultimate cost of Facebook taking forward these proposals. He wants government bodies to have legal access to data that could be involved in a crime.
Important people get security, but little ordinary people don't get security.
These are challenges that people like him can't even fathom, because they've never been in a situation where your very identity is criminalized.
Over 100 organizations signed a letter urging Facebook to continue its pursuit of end-to-end encryption against the wishes spelled out in the letter from the US, UK, and Australian governments. These organizations included the ACLU, Human Rights Watch, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
We felt it was important for Facebook to stand its ground and to understand that, that people like us who work on behalf of users, if Facebook stands with their users on this, we'll stand with them.
The leaders of WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger responded to the Attorney General William Barr in another open letter saying, quote, the backdoor access you are demanding for law enforcement would be a gift to criminals, hackers, and repressive regimes, creating a way for them to enter our systems and leaving every person on our platform more vulnerable to real-life harm.
I believe Facebook is absolutely correct to resist this. I do not think we want to be creating vulnerabilities because they're going to get exploited.
I've heard from people, friends and family, who say, why should I be worried that the government has my data? I'm not doing anything wrong. Or jokes that the government would be bored with my data. But Esra says that she might have to shut down Ahua if encryption were forcibly weakened.
I think the risk would multiply so much that we would just completely feel paralyzed, that we will no longer be able to grow, maintain, and sustain all of these initiatives. And the internet as a whole will lose so many voices, so many communities, so many narratives, so many perspectives that we really need in order to grow and expand and decentralize, genuinely decentralize the internet, so that it is more representative of marginalized voices that have been silenced for too long.
There's also the concern that taking encryption away from some people won't stop the criminals who will find other ways to communicate privately.
If we set up lawful access to certain channels, many of the adversaries will simply move to channels where that law enforcement access does not exist.
When you think about the real bad guys of the world, if we're talking about ISIS or terrorist groups, they're going to have access to strong encryption.
And an American policy calling for backdoors in encryption would create an international precedence.
If Apple creates this backdoor, then China is going to say, oh, well, that's nice. Iran's going to say, that's a beautiful backdoor.
Exactly.
Turkey,
hand it over.
Same thing, right?
From 2014, when Apple started encrypting users' iPhone content, to 2016, Manhattan's then district attorney said he was in possession of 175 iPhones that could have provided evidence in legal cases. Encryption has the potential, as we've seen, to thwart the efforts of law enforcement to catch criminals and prevent crimes.
The Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, the Fourth Amendment right to be free of search and seizures, these are all rights that give us protection against law enforcement that has downsides. That means that sometimes bad guys might go free. But we know that in order to keep the rest of us free, we need to have this balance in the role of law enforcement.
Amnesty International says there is no middle ground. If law enforcement is allowed to circumvent encryption, then anybody can. They feel that either everyone is protected, from community activists to terrorists, from regular people to governments, or no one is protected.
This is an incredibly complex area that we will have to grapple with as a society, and I would much rather us grapple with it proactively and arrive at some policy decisions than make, bad decisions in the wake of a disaster, one way or the other.
A lot of people sometimes think, oh no, this issue is exaggerated. And the bigger concern is what if militants are using encryption? That's why we should ban it, because in order to protect millions of people, we need to risk the lives of 100,000 people. That's not true. I think that argument is incredibly weak. I think there's a lot that we can do to balance the two.
You may not know it, but you rely on encryption every day already. And this isn't the government trying to prevent you from getting something. This is the government trying to take away something you already have.